Chapter 13 Year 872 PXF Summer. As is the case with all urgent news coming in the dark of night, the message was not a happy one. The captain of the Duke's personal regimen, a woman with whom Talon had served, and a newer addition to the guard that Talon did not know, had succumbed to a virulent disease and had died in the night. The Duke, without leave or pause, promoted Talon from his position as the Duke's envoy to Knight Captain on the spot, and had pre-selected a replacement for the other guard that only awaited Talon's approval. Having no real choice in the matter, Talon accepted the position, took the oath always to protect and obey the Duke's commands, and then asked for the candidate to be brought in. The new guard was a young Uldani, shockingly so. While full-grown and most likely the same age in years as Talon, the long-lived Uldani rarely let one so young outside their territories. His young age, while not as apparent physically, was more than conveyed by the effort he needed to exert to maintain control over the sometimes volatile impulses and passions that were a hallmark of his people. The Uldani had once been elves. For time immemorial, the elves glacially moved through their lives as other inhabitants of the material world bloomed and faded like the seasons. While the majority of elven people were content with their peaceful and measured existence, a faction amongst them was not. The Uldani realized to live on such a scale, seemingly in defiance of all but the geologic cycles of nature, was to live apart from life itself. They cast off their ties to the eternal groves and valleys of the elves, instead binding themselves to the elemental forces of nature and embracing the shamanistic traditions of the other races. The Uldani found that by so doing, their blood began to quicken. Their emotions didn't just bloom, they flourished, and as they fed their newfound passions, embracing the rush and vitality they brought, the fires of their lives burned ever hotter and brighter. No matter the emotion, be it rage, love, kindness, spite, or any other, it was to be savored and embraced, fueled to the height of its potential. To live as such was not without cost. To live so brightly, even for a species as inherently magical as elves, was to live briefly. The Uldani, in a trade they would happily repeat, began living only half as long as their elven brethren. What was at first only cultural, over the eons became biological, as the elves and Uldani diverged even further. For the Uldani, the porcelain delicacy of the elven countenance and physique evolved into a more rough-hewn and rugged visage and appearance. With their fey ancestry, elemental ties, shamanistic ways, and lives still 4 times the length of humans, the Uldani were a stunningly handsome, albeit volatile people, often misunderstood. While sometimes admired, the Empire's inhabitants more often disparaged them and their culture. The candidate before Talon appeared to be in his late teenage years if one measured on a human scale. Talon knew while he could be younger than himself, due to his heritage, he just as easily could be older. He had dark brown curls close cropped on the sides, but they were allowed to bunch into a mound on the top of his scalp and over his prominent brow and deep-set eyes. A lantern jaw and defined cheekbones framed a well-proportioned nose and thin, tight lips. The young Uldani guard kept having to adjust the stare he had leveled at Talon from across the room as he approached. First raising his eyes, and then his chin as well, having misread the taller human's scale and height when he entered the large chamber. As he approached, Talon could read in the young Uldani guard's eyes and posture both defiance and ambition, emotions tempered with a hopeful need for purpose and direction. Talon saw a glimpse of himself in this Uldani, both as a child looking up to Riken and as a young man looking to Lachlan.
"What's your name?"
Talon asked.
"Osman. I have not earned any other,"
the young guard replied. Immediately setting roles, Talon responded,
"You will call me Captain, and nothing more. Not Sir or my Lord."
With a pause, and a glance to the Duke on his throne, Talon reconsidered using Lachlan's words.
"Those are titles I do not wear."
Talon led Osman out to the central yard of the keep. With the Vermillion blade sheathed, he drew only his long dagger gifted to him by Mikal.
"Show me your skills."
Osman drew his longsword and proceeded to engage Talon. The Uldani swordsman was a capable enough fighter, but no match for Talon, even while wielding only a dagger. Talon corrected him without humiliation, but it became evident that Osmond did not have the speed to rely on his longsword alone.
Tomorrow, we begin your training to wield 2 weapons at once, unless you prefer a shield.
Talon watched the emotion rise in Osmond's eyes at the suggestion of a shield. The goading remark allowed him to get a sense of Osmond's self-control, a potential concern.
Have the armory find you something suitable for your offhand. Be here at dawn. Eat first.
Talon surprised himself with how quickly he fell into the role of captain, and realized Lachlan must have done the same as commander. While Talon felt he was not being as brutal and relentless as Lachlan, that could not be surmised by the look on Osmond's face by midday, much less by how he barely drug himself to the barracks that night. Talon considered ambushing Osmond the following morning the way Lachlan had ambushed him at dawn in his bed, but Osmond was not a child handling his first weapon, as Talon had been, so he decided against it. Within a few months, Osmond's daily training had changed from Talon driving him through a drudging grind of exhaustion and the frustrations of learning to dual-wield, to an exuberant sporting match between 2 combatants quickly becoming equals. The young Uldani warrior throttled his volatile personality into a mix of razor-like focus and unbridled ferocity that could change instantly and without warning. Even Talon, wielding the Vermillion blade and with his years of experience, could find himself quickly on the defensive as Osmond's tactics changed moment to moment mid-fight. Year 872 PXF. Autumn. As autumn's last leaves fell, Talon recognized that Osmond had made few connections or friends within Arnador, his Uldani heritage labeling him an outsider and embarrassingly unpredictable to the often milquetoast sensibilities of the local human nobles and peasants alike. Talon, likewise having spent far too many nights with only Lolly as company, approached Osmond as he was sheathing his swords after an especially challenging round of sparring.
Captain, may I help you?
Osmond inquired tentatively, his breath fogging the crisp air of the autumn evening.
Call me Talon, he answered with an outstretched hand. Lolly at the Sojourn's Rest is making an old favorite of mine for dinner. Why don't you join us?
Osmond looked a little shocked and increasingly reluctant until something clicked, and then, overcoming his hesitation, he grasped Talon's hand enthusiastically.
That sounds amazing! I've been living off alley stew, and let me assure you, it is as awful as it sounds.
Talon, suddenly concerned.
Have you not been receiving your wages?
Oh, I have plenty of coin,
Osmond confessed.
Or enough, at least.
And then, with unabashed candor,
It is just many establishments won't accept it from me, and I got tired of being turned away or served with a concerned wariness.
Now it was time for Talon's temper to flare.
Are you telling me that a member of the Duke's personal regiment has been denied service within the walls of Arnador? I will personally...
Osmond interrupted him, with words wiser than his young face should possess.
It is a common misconception, but the Uldan people also embrace peacefulness and calm as much as rage and passion. Acceptance will come.
He added, with a mischievous grin more in line with his boyish looks.
And if not, the bastards will be long dead before the first gray hair marks my brow.
Then, with a flourish, Osmond dramatically pulled a single silver strand of hair from Talon's scalp to drive home the point and diffuse his still-growing temper. It was the first time a deep and pure belly laugh had escaped Talon's lips in years. The laughter was infectious, and soon the two of them were howling like jackals, not only at the original joke, but also at the absurdity of neither of them seemingly being able to stop laughing. Finally, breathless, with arms clutching cramped sides and wiping away tears from their eyes, small guffaws threatening to start the whole spectacle all over again, the two headed out of the Arnador Keep and to the Sojourn's Rest. The evening had begun raucously at the keep and only became more boisterous as the night went on. Dinner was ravenously consumed and vocally lauded, with first Osmond and then Talon standing on their chairs proclaiming to the blushing, then exuberant Lolly of the uncontested deliciosity of the meal. The evening moved from the inn's private kitchen and dining area to the main public room and tavern. Feeling more intoxicated from the unbridled chaos of Osmond's personality than ale or spirits, Talon allowed Osmond to drag him onto the stage to join the bards performing there. The two of them elicited roars of laughter as Osmond played the fool to Talon's well-known stoic reputation. It was well after 2 a.m. before the whirlwind that was Osmond quieted, landing them at a table with a half-dozen empty and half-drunk tankards of ale. Talon had a more than general knowledge of Uldani culture and territories through his childhood tutors and his search for Riken. Most notably, their custom of having to earn their surname. Once earned, it was of their choosing and not necessarily related to a family connection. It was one of the main things that had hindered his search for the Farseer. As they wound down at the table, feet up on chairs opposite them, Talon almost asked Osmond if he knew of Arcatavia Thorandis, but the night had been such a welcome respite from all the weight Talon had burdened himself with for nearly 2 decades. He instead remained quiet, and gave himself permission to just be happy for a moment. After that, Talon and Osmond became fast friends, often taking meals together at midday and in the evenings. Around Arnador, the two became well known for their antics and high spirits. Establishments that had once shunned Osmond now begged the two to visit not only for their own copious consumption, but also for the crowds that followed them and stayed deep into the night. There were even taverns that attempted to hire them to make appearances. While flattering, that kind of commitment was not in Osmond's nature, and Talon found it to be an inappropriate proposition for the knight captain of the guard. Instead, on Hearth's Rest, the two would put on elaborate displays of acrobatics and fighting skills, the likes of which many in the region had never seen. Their duels would begin in front of the orphanage in the silliest way imaginable, and then range throughout Ellery Square and the Trellis Market. Over rooftops, through the fountains, across wagons, and into taverns, exiting with a featured ale in hand and lauding endorsements of the establishment. For hours they would delight the gathered crowds and especially made sure to include the children of Arnador in their schemes. The spectacle was the talk of the town for days, and as each Hearth's Rest approached, it seemed like all discussions centered around what the two could possibly do to top their previous outing. On the cold midwinter eve of Riken's birthday, Talon's life slowed enough for him to reflect on his growing relationship with Osmond. The bond between Osmond and him was not unlike the depth of his bond with Riken, but entirely different in its emotion. From the first moments, Riken had been his love, infatuation, and eventually his soulmate. On the other hand, Osmond was his best friend, a comrade in arms of times both serious and silly, and like a brother he never had. If asked, Talon would unhesitantly say he loved Osmond, but he was not in love with Osmond. As Talon's mind became more settled and assured in his feelings, and the slithering voice could find no purchase even on this night when it was usually its most vocal, Talon blew out a single candle and wished Riken, wherever he was, a happy birthday. Through the rest of winter, the knight captain and young Uldani guard quickly became the most sought-after guests at all of the season's festival gatherings within the city and the surrounding estates. Finally, as the weather turned more temperate, just after the first Hearth's Rest of spring, an engraved and wax-sealed letter Talon had been dreading might arrive finally did. An invitation to the Festival of Blossoms Gala at the Vermillion estate.